So good morning. Everyone enjoy the party last night? Yeah? That's good. Well, thank you for getting up and coming to my talk, How to Embed Security in Your Process. My name is Timothy DeBlock, and we'll get right into this. So why this talk? I tend to move around a lot too, so I wanted to get out of the security conference team, so I was looking at several security conferences on application security. My role is that I sit with the development team, and I am their security resource. We actually have two different buildings, so the devs are in one building, the security team's in the other. So I actually sit with the development team and provide them, security resource, answer questions, look at their stuff, see where we can make improvements. So a lot of this talk is based on my experience. And I wanted to give this talk because I believe developers have a lot to say as far as security goes. Even being a security person there, I can't see absolutely everything that they're doing. I can't, be everywhere at once. So I have to have a lot of trust in my development team that they're going to do things in the right way. And if they have a question, they're able to come to me. Along those points, I found this node security survey recently, which three-fourths of node developers believe that security is an important part of their role. And so I believe that, developers really want to get it right. It's just maybe they don't necessarily know how to go about doing it. And you can see there also 1/3 of them feel like they're going to be the target of a large-scale attack, and that can be a little bit worrying if you're hosting sensitive information or doing, other types of sensitive things. So what's being done about it? Well, not really a whole lot. As you can see there, less than 30% are combining manual and automated code to look for flaws. Also, less than 30% are looking for, discover vulnerable packages within, their environment. So is this incompetence? I don't think so. I think this is just people not knowing where to start, how to, what tools are available, and how to get started with this stuff. So hopefully, it's just a lack of experience. Hopefully this talk will provide some guidance for you, some actionable things. And if you're doing a lot of the stuff I talk about, then hopefully it builds your confidence a little bit that you're on the right path as far as security. Because I believe that if you're in this room, you're one of those three-fourths of people that want to take security seriously and see it as an important part of your role. I believe that security teams, in the security industry, I know in the development community, there's talk of hard to find jobs and hard to fill roles, and in security it's a lot the same way. It's like over 1 million or something roles are unfilled. We're not going to necessarily solve that by just getting more people. We're going to solve that by working together with development teams to get security embedded within the environment. So security wins. This is something that I like to always do before I do a talk, particularly outside of my industry. I am really impressed with the knowledge I working with developers. I don't have to explain a lot of concepts. I don't have to go down to a basic level. It's like, hey, we need to put input validation here, or they're already doing it. If I walk in and there's peer and code review, that's security in itself. Quality code is secure code. So if that's already being done, that's already one step towards having a more secure application. Using, frameworks now, as long as you're configuring them properly, those are really good too. Encryption and certificates are also something that I've been impressed with, as far as I don't have to go all the way down to the basic level to explain how the certificates work and how they should be implemented. And most of the time, developers know what they need to do with that stuff. And that can be a very deep field. I don't have the deepest knowledge on it, but it's really complicated, and so I like to give props to developers for really understanding that stuff and trying to get it right. And an example of one example I like to give is that I've walked into a development team and they were having a design discussion within one of their tickets, and they had 2 great paragraphs on security, and the last part was the problem, which was, but I'm not a security person. No, that's exactly what I want you to do. He couldn't have put it any better than I could have. And so a lot of times it's just, confidence that you are doing things from a secure standpoint. There might be, little nuances here or there that you don't do. But for the most part, you're trying to get it right. So I like to give people props for that. So here's the roadmap of the talk. As I was building out this talk, I decided I would go along with kind of a process, a development life cycle, and kind of talk through some of the different things there. So we'll talk through inventory, we'll talk through threat modeling, and I know you've seen probably just about every security talk I've been to here has had threat modeling in it. I won't spend an entire session on it, but we'll walk through some practical steps with it. Then we'll talk about some coding activities, and then finally tools and testing and things like that. And then I'll provide resources and training options if you really want to dig more into security. So, how to embed security? Inventory. I know what you're thinking. I'm in the wrong talk. Inventory? It's boring. This is a snapshot. This is just a small picture. It's a small set of logos from a bigger graphic that I've seen where it has all the different technologies out there. And if you look at this, you need to know what's in your environment so that you can patch it, so you can address vulnerabilities, so you know how to understand it. There is technology out there that if you just throw it out there, it could get you compromised. Has anybody heard of MongoDB and all the ransomware in 2017 that was going around? Default configuration. Go out and grab a public IP, no authentication, done. It's still out there too. Not as much as it used to be because they've actually moved on to other technology that does a lot of the same things. So you need to know what to patch, and you need to have a basic understanding of how to do configuration. And just really, this is one of the things that I've walked into development teams, and it's like, well, where's your data flow diagrams? Where's your inventory? But it's very important. This is one of the first things I start to build out, and that's because we heard of EQUIFAX. Pretty sure everybody's heard of EQUIFAX in this room. EQUIFAX lost information for half of the U.S. population. And the reason for that was an Apache Struts 2 vulnerability. And within a few days of that coming out, it was being exploited. And that was the case with EQUIFAX here. They had an Apache Struts 2 in their environment that they didn't patch for. You know, you could blame the sysadmins, you could blame developers. I don't know what their environment is doing and who's doing the patching there, but it didn't happen. Something maybe a little more close to home. NPM. Who heard about LeftPad? LeftPad is a package, plugin, or package module for Node. There was a dispute with the name, LeftPad, and the author unpublished the code, and that took down many websites. Because LeftPad is, all it is just a bit of padding on the left side of the screen. And that was a dependency of a dependency of a dependency of packages. So you can see where that caused a problem. I argued at first that this was just a business issue, but then one of my buddies pointed out it's a denial of service attack. Maybe there's not something you can necessarily do about that, but having understanding of what's in your code is very important. Understanding what you're actually putting in there, because there are people typo squatting, putting out malicious packages so that it just collects credit card information and then ships it off somewhere. So one of the steps and how are people tracking packages? As we saw, less than 30% in that survey aren't doing it. This is the same graphic. Of the people doing it, 26 are doing manual, 30 are doing automated. I'm sorry, and then 40% is doing nothing, and then 4 is other. So you know, again, there are ways out there to check for this stuff. Where do you start? Well, you can start with RSS feeds. This is more of a manual type of check. You have the Node security platform for Node, obviously. Both of these services can provide paid services, but they have free RSS feeds. And all they are is within your RSS feed, they will put out when they find a module that has a vulnerability in it. And so you can then, if NSP also has a tool, which we'll talk about later on, that you can put in place to break builds. And so if you're manually watching it, then you know it might be coming up if you're developing something. And just, you know, they have high to low severity sometimes. So maybe medium doesn't need to be addressed right away, but, you know, a high you probably want to take a look at and see if there's an issue there. Sync.io is along the same lines there. And they're actually, what I like about them is that they do more than just NPM. So they do Maven, they do pip, they do Go, they do all these different packages. And they're actually a little bit quicker on the Node side for the Node security platform. So if you have multiple languages, Sync.io is probably a good one to watch. And again, they have paid services if you want to get into more security vulnerabilities type stuff. I haven't used them, so I don't have much of a use case, but you can certainly check it out. Shifting gears a little bit. Do you know what's publicly available in your environment, particularly with code? Do you have set by default that your repos are set to private if it's not an open source project? People are out there searching this stuff. There's an entire project where a guy's just looking for passwords and tokens and letting people know about it. So don't put and you really don't want to put any of your sensitive information within your code base. There's really not much need to. And again, people are scanning, and I want to do a demo here of Shodan. Has anyone heard of Shodan before? Okay, good. Some familiarity there. Let me zoom in a little bit. All right, so Shodan here. So, and all I'm going to look for is MongoDB because that's always a fun one to look for. If my has the internet been spotty for people? Yeah, that's no good. Yeah, I usually do it on my hotspot, and I blew through my hotspot on the drive up here, so that's okay because we actually have screenshots. Wrong one. There we go. Okay, so just doing a search for MongoDB, you can kind of see two different instances there. You got one that actually has some kind of authentication partially enabled, and then this one where you can see the two databases. That doesn't have any authentication, and all it's doing is scanning. All Shodan's doing is I type in MongoDB. You can search for IPs, but it's just scanning and seeing what it can actually reach, and it can actually just reach the database. So it doesn't have any authentication on there. You can see there they've actually marked it as like compromised. So I think the warning is a new one. Earlier in 2017, when all the ransomware was happening, you could go on here and see like DB_hack with a 4 instead of an A. Like I said, I think that a lot of people have got wind of this and secured their MongoDBs, but some people may have not, or these just may have been sitting out there forgotten. Who knows? But you can search for IP ranges. You can do all sorts of stuff on Shodan. If you have an educational account, he'll give you a free Premium Pro account, which is pretty much what I have. I signed up with my creds from college. So one thing I'm going to do with this talk too is stop at the end of each section and ask for any questions. Does anyone have any questions? I've done this talk in 30 minutes, so and I'm usually pretty quick anyway. So if you guys have questions, feel free to let me know. Any questions out there about any of this stuff? Any comments either? Oh, did it? I'm sorry. Okay. I'll have to fix that in my slides. So yeah, I like very interactive talks. If you guys have something to add or anything, let me know. So we will shift back here to oh, yeah, my internet's spotty. That's okay. I have a backup slide, so we'll just do that. Boom. Okay. Backup's important, by the way. All right. So threat modeling. As I mentioned, what is this contraption? I'm sure you guys have heard it at other security talks if you go in there. I'm going to do a little bit different than what I've seen so far, but what you want to do is you want to keep it simple. This is a look at your part of your application, or you can look at the whole application. If you're doing the whole application, you want to look at it at a very high level, because you can get bogged down in a lot of different things. And I like to describe that modeling as something that you do like on a daily basis. You drive a car and someone's in your right lane, and you're like, okay, if this person swerves over to my lane, can I get over to the left, or do I need to slam on my brakes? So threat modeling is something simple as that, and that's something that you do on a daily basis. You know, wherever you, I don't want to walk down that dark alley. There might be someone hiding behind the dumpster. But usually you want to keep it as simple and practical as possible. Figure out what works best for you and your organization, and realize nothing is going to be 100% accurate. So, you know, that's okay. You can still do it. It's still a very valuable exercise. In fact, I recently started spinning this up with our development team a few months ago, and one of the guys, we had a really great session, a really great talk about the design of what we were doing within an authentication piece. And we actually, what came of that wasn't only security items to look at and decisions to make, but also it was getting people on the same page. So not everyone was necessarily, oh, we were doing this and instead of this. It's like simple things like that. We've also used it to get a better understanding of technology and different things within the application that maybe one developer knew, but not all the other developers knew about. And so, you know, just sharing that knowledge a little bit more is one of the benefits that comes out of this, not just security. So the first thing you need to do is set your scope. You want to do your purpose, list your assets. This is where you do a data flow diagram. We have had sessions where someone brought a data flow diagram, which is always great. We've had sessions where we spent the entire hour-long session doing a data flow diagram. We ended up in that one figuring out, oh yeah, we've just drawn 2 data flow diagrams, so there's 2 different use cases. And that's fine. But for us, that's what works, is we just do an hour each week, and then, you know, if we don't get to everything, we just push it to the next week. So that next week, we actually were able to start taking them right away to the data flow diagram and looking at it from a security perspective. We've also had sessions where we've built the data flow diagram, and it was small enough that we were able to get through everything we're going to talk about here within an hour-long session. Maybe 2 hours works for you. Whatever works best for you is what you should be looking at. One thing to worry about is scope creep, which can come into a session like this. And you just kind of flag each other on it and call each other out. So after you set your scope, you want to list your security features, your security profile. You want to list things like, what are you doing for input validation, authentication, authorization, config management, encryption. You know, whatever you have as far as security in the application, you want to list that out. Then, once you have that, you're going to attack your application. And for developers, the best method is using STRIDE, which is spoofing, tampering, repudiation, repudiation is saying you didn't do it, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privileges. And my favorite time is we had denial of service, and we were talking about the authentication piece with the dev team, and they realized that they could lock out everyone within the organization's account. So usually you have, like, after 3 bad attempts, lock it out, which I was actually kind of a little afraid, but a little happy that they were thinking from that mindset. So, and you really want to, it doesn't have to be super complicated. We've talked about everything from tokens, like messing with tokens and cookies, to, you know, what do you do with taking a screenshot of sensitive information on the screen, which is probably the bane of security systems as far as information disclosure. You know, people can just take a screenshot, and it's really hard to account for that. So, and you're along the way, you're documenting all this stuff. So you're documenting your target, your attack technique, and then your countermeasure. And the countermeasure, that's where you're going to really have some interesting discussions about how to mitigate for this stuff. And my favorite mitigation was for the screenshot, in that they talked about ghosting a username on the page of the sensitive information. That doesn't stop people from doing it, but it does, like, deter people, or, you know, at least it gives it some accountability. For security people, if we can actually get a username of where it came from, that helps us track down who did it. We can look at logs, see if there's a compromised account, you know, et cetera. So that was a really ingenious mitigation that I hadn't even thought about. And yes, we even talked about digging even deeper. Oh, we could get around this by going to, doing this technique. Well, and really you can't account for everything. So again, it doesn't need to be the perfect solution. Because the perfect solution for security is to just unplug the server from the internet. That's the solution, which isn't feasible especially if you're a business. So these scenarios can be simple, they can be complicated. Usually, once you get one going, you start thinking about it in a different way. And I really like the challenge of thinking about that. And the developers have driven most of that. I might have to give one to start out, but then they start just rolling on it. So really, just start throwing one out there. It can be ridiculous. It can be a movie type of scenario. And we've done that where it's like, well, you can't really do that, but okay, what if we find a way in and we do this? What can we do here? What can we do to mitigate the person from getting in? Once you're done with that, once you figure that out, you want to rate your threats, and you use DREAD. And you tell security people like that. You're going to rate your damage potential, reproducibility, exploitability, affected users, and discoverability. And you're going to do this and rate them low to high, and then you're going to assign a number to that. So 1 is low, 3 is high, and then you just add them up. And that's going to give you a priority listing of the issues that need to be tracked down, need to be addressed, have tickets written for it. In fact, this past week I did this, and we've had 15s in the past that I wanted them to address. This past week we went through and we had like 5s and 8s, which is pretty much like lows. And one of the developers pinged me after the session, like, so should I start working on this? I was like, no, let's that's a low. We've discussed that there's a lot of mitigating factors keeping that from being a big issue. And so what I want you to focus on is I want you to focus on the highs that we had. I have this other things that I think is more important. So this really helps with driving how and when you're going to address these vulnerabilities. So these are some resources. One of the things I'd like to do here is show you the OWASP Threat Dragon that was on the screen. Back. Oh, here it is. OWASP Threat Dragon is an open source project from OWASP. It's a really great tool. If it works, this shouldn't need an internet connection, so I don't know why. I did not sacrifice enough last night for that. Huh, that's interesting. All right, so I'm sorry. OWASP Threat Dragon is something that's okay. So OWASP Threat Dragon is there. It's actually a really neat tool to get into, and it's really easy. I'll try again towards the end if we have time to see if I can't get it working. Draw.io is another one. I mean, really, it's pretty basic. Whatever you have available in house is usually pretty good. I've used OWASP Threat Dragon before, and usually what I do is I whiteboard the diagram in the meeting, and then I'll go after the fact and use Threat Dragon to write it out. Adam Shostak's book, Threat Modeling, is a massive book. I recommend it, and I recommend it because I had intended to read the entire book before I started doing threat modeling. One of my favorite things, though, about the book is after the first chapter, they say, just go do it. And that was some really good advice, because we just started doing it, and we can refine the process after the fact. It can get very complicated, and I think it's probably more encompassing than just development. There are other areas that do threat modeling within IT. Walking through this threat modeling, there's an actual great Pluralsight course which we'll share towards the end by Peter Mosmans, which is about an hour-and-a-half long course, and it could probably be shorter because it covers multiple threat modeling techniques, but if you just focus on what he focuses on for developers, that's a great point of how to get started, and that's really what helped me get started and helped me build out this talk. So that's the end of threat modeling. Are there any questions about that? So yeah, we actually just did one of those where it wasn't a lot of user interaction. It was like, how does everything work within the environment there? So I mean, you can, if you have data flow between the two, that yeah, does that answer your question? I mean, typically, yeah, you think about it from a user's perspective, and they're coming in and they're doing some kind of interaction. But we've also this past one we did. I'll just tell you, we did like a Docker and talked about the environment there, which it had some user interaction, but that was like a big piece, and it's actually we considered outside of the scope as more like how does it interact within there. So that's where I rely on the developers to tell me what's in place as far as that. And actually, what I found interesting is that as we discuss that, they start going, "Oh, I need to correct that." It's like, and it's like, hold on, maybe we'll get to that. That's like I said, everyone does it a little bit differently. I like to keep it as practical as possible, so I don't come in with like a big list of everything we need to check off or do. It's just more, okay, what do we have in place? Now let's try to break it. So, and like I said, I'm still learning how to get better at threat modeling and refining the process a little more. What we have works pretty well though. So, yeah. Yeah, so what I do is we whiteboard it, write everything down on the whiteboard, of course take a picture afterwards, and then I go to our documenting system and like Confluence, or if you have an internal one, just document it there. Like I have a security area there that I document all that, and then either that or I'll go to the VAs and we'll write the tickets for that kind of stuff, or the developers will write the tickets too if it's something that they have to handle. So, does that answer your question? All right. Any others? Comments? Nope. Cool. Coding activities. I know what you're thinking. Yeah, this is what I came for. This was the part that I thought would be the meat. Before I get to that, I want to have a little bit of a rant about security vulnerabilities and the fact that they are ultimately just bugs. When you're working security vulnerability or security findings or security issues, they should be prioritized along with your bugs in production. Within ours, we have something called a defect severity matrix, which is just critical, high, medium, and low, and there's a timeline associated with each one of those. Critical, obviously, is everybody drop what they're doing and go do it. High is, well, within the next week we need to get it done. Medium, like next 2 to 3 weeks, next 2 to 3 sprints, and then low is kind of down the road a little bit. Security findings that are low should not overtake production findings, bugs that are high. So that's the whole point, is that you rate it along with it. And you want to rate it along within the context of your application, because there can be security findings that are absolute BS. And this is something that I have found working with developers as part of my role is I'm going through security findings from, we have clients that do test our stuff or will hire a company to test our stuff. And it has opened my eyes about how much security people suck. I have gone on rants before about certain security companies because I have had to knock down high stuff to low or even info before. And so I feel bad for some of the people that, because they're not taking your application in context. They're just taking what they have and they have a generic severity rating and just applying it to your application. One example of this is a feedback form within a logged in application. People are logging in using our application, and they said that someone could DOS the feedback form, so we should put a CAPTCHA on it. No, because one, I don't care. I'm just going to shut off that account. Two, we want people to give feedback, and if you put CAPTCHA on there, I'm sure everyone has struggled with CAPTCHA before. That's going to cause more people not to give feedback. So and that was a high finding, and it was like, no, that's low, and I'm being generous. I really should be info. So there are things like that. And if you get a raw report from a security team, security or vendor, which is usually like a spreadsheet, or I'll show you an example of a report out of one of our tools, you have my permission to give it back to them and tell them to go try again. That they should be bringing you actual stuff that applies to your application. I cannot stand when that happens. If I get a raw report that's for one of our applications, I just ignore it. My eyes glaze over. I just ignore it, and I tell them. I have sat on calls and said, "Can you confirm this?" And they haven't been able to reproduce the actual issue, and they're like, "Okay, we'll take that report." So there are, security, mostly security vendors that are doing that. There are good ones out there, but what I'm finding is that some of those can be really hard to find, and if you can find them, they're probably expensive. So, ran over there. IDE plugins. And this was something I was going to research and thought this would be like the best part of the talk. Everyone will come in here looking for IDE plugins. I found this paper in my research, and it's got this big old list of IDE plugins you can use. So they're out there, but based on the conclusion here, they're kind of meh. There's not a lot of information. This report is only like 2 to 3 pages long, by the way. So it's actually a really, really easy, short read. And as you can see there, I have the highlighted area. It's just there's not a lot of information, and there's not a lot of information about how they're doing the scan. And when we break it down, IDE plugins, if we're talking about them, the idea is that as you're coding, it's going to give you feedback on your security. Oh no, you're about to put some kind of security issue in. But that's a problem because that's ultimately just static analysis. If you know anything about static analysis, they have a lot of false positives. They require a lot of tuning. So if we're going to have an IDE plugin that gives you feedback on your code, it's going to require a lot of tuning, which may or may not be to your benefit. Someone could spend 3 hours on something that the IDE plugin is saying is an issue and then realize, oh yeah, it's not, or it's mitigated in this other area. So that requires a lot of familiarity within code and security in general. And if that's the case, why not just focus on improving your security knowledge? One I have found that I think is pretty good, and this kind of goes back to the NPM outdated, is Atom has an NPM outdated module. So it's simple. There's a low false positive rate here. Are you up to date or not? So like stuff like that, I think can be really beneficial, and it gives you a little bit of a lead time on if you have outdated NPM modules. And ultimately, like I talk about that a lot here, but that's a very important part of security is keeping your things up to date. If you're doing that, you're knocking out security vulnerabilities left and right. So that is a very important part and something we preach a lot on. So are there any, that's finishing that section, are there any questions around that? Find bugs? Sonar lint? Okay. Right. Right. Secure Code Warrior? Okay. Great. That's some good stuff. Oh, really? On IDE plugins, or come talk to me after? I'd like to get your feedback because you can tell my research hasn't produced a whole lot. Right. Right. Are there any other questions? Are you guys ready to get to some tools? Thankfully, the tools don't. Well, one of the tools requires internet access, but we'll see if that pops up. Dependency check. Okay. Yeah. So let me ask you. Yeah. So let me, because I have used that before, but you have to plug in everything manually in your application, don't you? Like, there's no way to just scan for it. But like, how do you get all this stuff within your environment into the actual? Okay. And then it just scans it. Interesting. Yeah, you and me need to talk afterwards. Yes, sir. Okay. Okay. Uh-huh. Okay. So OWASP dependency check. I actually had this in the talk, but I was struggling with it, so that's why I want to talk to you. Yeah, so OWASP dependency check is a good one because that just lets you know if something's out of date. Okay. Yeah, so JFrog Artifactory is doing scanning of Docker images. Is the feedback? I know it's getting some feedback here. Is it better now? Okay. Good. Yeah, and I've noticed a lot more services are doing that kind of stuff where they're doing some of the scanning within there. I think GitHub recently came out with like security alerts. Um, so that's all great stuff. So leverage some of the stuff that's already in there, and that's embedding it within within your stuff already. So that's really good. So tools. I know what you're thinking. Yeah, some tools. So Node Security Platform. What's great about this, it's fairly simple to set up. Again, it's just checking for outdated NPM modules that have vulnerabilities in them. You can do it in two ways. You can do it if you're doing a continuous integration, continuous development pipeline. You can break it on builds there, or you can break it in as part of pull requests. And all it does is check for the Node NPM version, and that's pretty much simply it. One gotcha with this: make sure you keep an NSP up to date. It's very important to keep the tool up to date that is checking for all the other updated packages. Static analysis, and I've already kind of touched on this a little bit. You have two varieties here usually: open source and commercial. Open source usually focuses in on one language. It's free, of course. Support might be a little bit spotty there. OWASP has a great page on open source and a list of them. There's actually a Wikipedia on static analysis that has it too. On the commercial side, it of course costs, but it is it usually they cover multiple languages, and a lot of these are out there and they have plugins to other to pipelines and tools along those lines like Jenkins and things like that. And static analysis does it from it tests code in its rawest form, so it's looking at it. So again, you have a lot of false positives there. Actually, let me go back here because I do have to mention that I put this in place within our environment, and it took us about 3 months. So what we did initially was we just set up the static analyzer tool, and then what it did is part of the build, it would download the code, upload it to the static analyzer, and the build would continue. And this was to then go through and look at the findings that it was finding and actually tune the static analyzer to make sure that it wasn't going to break things on false positives. Because if you just put this in and start breaking builds, you're going to have a lot of problems, a lot of chaos. You're not going to get any work done. So it took us 3 months of going through, finding, getting rid of false positives, tuning it. And I had to set up a couple meetings with the devs to sit down and understand the code a little bit more. Sometimes we had to do tickets out of that because there were actual issues there. And we wanted to keep those from not being an issue. So, dynamic analyzer. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's my rant earlier. Yep, exactly. Because yeah, that's part of it. I think that's a problem too within security is that people will do it. They feel like they have to justify themselves, and so they'll absolutely. Right. Well, yeah. I feel like I've become a better security person because the developers have pushed back on me, and it's actually made me have to explain why this is an actual issue, and it kind of helped me reset some of my priority on some things. Because as security people, we live in a constant state of paranoia. We freak out. Yep. Yep. And yeah, so it should be more of a collaborative effort between the developers and security teams. Maybe you have someone, maybe you don't. I don't know. It just needs to. You just need to start having, like you said, conversations. So this is Zap from OWASP, Z-Attack Proxy by Simon Bennett. He is a developer at Mozilla, and he wrote this tool because he wanted to get a better understanding of his code from a security perspective. Security people started using it and thought it was such a great tool that just were like, yeah, we'll use this. For people who have never set up a proxy before, I like walking through this. You go to Tools, Options here, you go to Local Proxy, and you just set it up as your local host, 8080. And now what the proxy is doing is capturing absolutely everything between what your computer is doing. I have a VM here, and your computer and the application. And then on this side, there's Foxy Proxy for Firefox, it has it for Chrome, and all I'm doing is just mirroring the settings I have within Zap there. So I could change that port and have it on 8081 if I need to. So whatever, 127.0.0.1, which is localhost. And then what I do is I simply go through the application. So we'll say CodeMash. Someone want to give me a password? CodeMash. Yeah. CodeMash. Favorite food? CodeMash. Nice. All right. So we're going to register that, and then we're going to go through the forgot password here. So we'll do CodeMash. And our favorite food was CodeMash. So make everything easy. All right, need a new password. Mash code? Okay, I heard that first. Sorry. Mash code. All right, so there. And then if you go back here, you can see that we have started mapping out the application. You can see here that I've picked up a little bit of something. If you need to, because one thing would warn you about here is you don't want to go testing other people's site with this tool. You can get in a lot of trouble. This is only for stuff that you're working on, or you have explicit permission to assess. So if you have something in here, you don't want to have even the slightest chance of messing with it, you can exclude it from the proxy, and then it still goes to the proxy, but it just gets passed through. So it's not there. It's pretty much not there anymore. Oh, really? Oh, that's cool. Uh-huh. Written permission, yes. Yep. Yeah, and that could be especially in like a big organization. So if your manager says to go test it, make sure you have that written permission so it's his, not yours. If the CIO comes down and goes, who took that out on my website? Oh, is it? Okay. Cool. So what we're doing now is we're going to spider the website. And that's just going to go through and click on all the links I may have missed. Oh, look, it found an admin page that we could mess with if you wanted to. From there, you do like Ajax Spider if you have Ajax content. You can do Force Browse Site, which will look for hidden directories, and it's got a long list of names that you can use. It has like a word list. What we're going to do is skip all that because that can take time. And we're going to do an active scan. And within here, you can see that the tool is kicked off and started doing a bunch of different stuff. So right now it's looking for path traversal. We're going to skip ahead. Remote file inclusion, skip ahead. Server-side include, cross-site scripting. SQL injection. This is an intentionally vulnerable application as part of Tim Tom's Practical Web Application Penetration Testing course. And I like doing the SQL injection part here because I want to make a point about dynamic analyzers because we've kind of talked about the same with static analyzers. So if you go to the alerts page here, you're going to see all your actual findings. You can see I have SQL injection. And what's great about, what I like about Zap is that it gives you a description. It gives you the URL, so it's on the reset page. Confidence is medium, that's important. Username and then the attack parameter. What I do as a security person is I go confirm this. So I just pretty much copy and paste this if this pings, and then go put it in that field without the proxy. Due to time, I'm going to have to speed up a little bit here. You can also see the request traffic for that particular thing, and then the response. And if you look at the response here, there's actually not any SQL information that was returned. So, point, dynamic analyzers can have false positives as well. So that's why you need to go back and confirm all your findings so that you don't put in something to piss people off. And then I can, this works. It has a nice HTML report that is pretty useful that you can then, copy off and send to people or use. And it has all the different findings on there. It has XML as well if you're using some kind of tool to collect that kind of information. So, any questions about that? Yes.
So, do you have definitions to test this out? Aren't there like
Yes. If you sign up for an account there, then you should be fine. They have a scope, so you have to stay within their scope. People have gotten in trouble. They found stuff outside of scope and gotten in trouble for it, or they weren't paid, or there was some big hooplas about some of that stuff, for example. But yeah, if you go do bug bounty stuff, so you sign up for Bug Crowd or HackerOne, that should be usually pretty safe. Most of those too will say don't use a scanner, so you have to actually manually look for some of this stuff. Probably because they found all these scanners are great for finding a lot of low-hanging fruit, but in the context of your application, there might be other issues there that the scanner just can't find. And you can tune scanners and have it do a variety of different things as well. Yes, sir. Yes. Your which club? Okay. Oh, and you guys are just like, hey, we can use my work site? Hard lesson learned there. That's amazing. I love that story, by the way. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of OWASP has a lot of vulnerable stuff, which I was going to mention my resource part of it. Yeah, they have a lot of vulnerable stuff out there for you to go play with. So as you can see here, I just have VMs stood up that I mess with. So this is Fiddler here. And as you can see here, what I like, Fiddler is kind of more, I guess, is more of an advanced developer tools for Chrome. So this is a proxy that you set up a lot of the same way. It has some plugins, and in this one I have the CSP rule collector. So if you guys were in here for the beginning, right before my talk, I showed you how to do the Harlem Shake on websites. This will go through your website, and it'll show you what rules you need to put in place. There's still some testing that needs to go along here with this, but this is a great way if you're looking to set up content security policy on your site. It's a great way to use Fiddler in this plugin for that. CSP rule collector. All right. So, I need to speed up a little bit here. Burp Suite has. Burp Suite is another dynamic analyzer that's used by security people. In fact, it's used by most security application professionals. They prefer that over Zap. Zap is entirely free. Burp is about $300 a month, or not month, $300 a year. And there is a community version, but a lot of the active stuff and automated scans are throttled, so it can take a lot of time to go through that stuff. But it's there if, in case people are looking to get in an application security field, that might be one you want to look at. And a lot of people probably recommend. I like Zap. I came up on Zap because it was free. Didn't have the money even for Burp. I was working for the state of South Carolina at the time. The cloud. Quickly here, we have Azure and AWS. They have a lot of great stuff built in baseline, and they've got a lot of great scans. If I had an internet connection, I would show you. Unfortunately, I don't. But they have a lot of great stuff. They do a lot of security blogs, different things like that. Look at in there and get a better understanding of that kind of stuff. Along with that, we talked about having stuff out in the open. S3 buckets are a big thing right now in that people are searching at publicly available S3 buckets looking for sensitive information. And then they're either downloading it to use it maliciously, or they are taking it to the organization and telling them they have just had a breach because they've downloaded all their information. If they can't get a hold of the company, they will go to the news, and then your company's in the news. So understanding what's out there as far as permission is very important. I have found S3 Browser, which is usually just an upload tool. It's for non-commercial use, it's free. For commercial use, it's $30, so it's not that expensive. And what's great about it is that every time something like the S3, another S3 bucket was compromised or publicly available that had sensitive information in it, hit the news, my boss would ask me to go check our S3 buckets for our environment. And I had to go into each one. That's a pain in the ass. What S3 Browser does, it will tap in. You set it up to pretty much give it access to your environment. It then goes and scans and look for anything publicly available. It also has this cool little button here called Fix Selected Issues. So you can just easily fix it. Be careful about that because there might be something that does need to be publicly available, like logos, images, things like that. And, really just looking for any kind of sensitive information out there. S3 bucket is kind of like an online, I'm not going to explain this very well, online place for people like store images, or they'll put information in there to use within the AWS environment. So, any other questions about that? Okay, we're winding down here. So, resources. We've mentioned this a lot. OWASP, Open Web Application Security Project. They have a massive knowledge base. They have cheat sheets. They've obviously got tools. They've got a lot of different things they're trying to do there. They're trying to, it's aimed at developers. I don't know that it's written very well for developers. They're trying to address that and write it to make it more easily consumable. I love podcasts, and two of my favorites are Risky Business and Troy Hunt's video log, which comes in an audio format. Risky Business covers everything from a general InfoSec standpoint. So if you're just trying to keep up with the industry, that's a good place to do it. He's got a news section at the beginning. He's got, and then like two interview segments. Usually it's one relevant to today's topic, and then there's usually one sponsored because he's like a full-time journalist for information security, and this podcast is a big thing of what he does. But I will say that the sponsored interviews are usually just as good as the regular interviews that he has. Can't recommend enough. He really digs deep into issues because, again, security people can freak out, and he will call BS if he needs to, or say it is an actual issue. So, and I've even heard him correct himself. So he's come on the next podcast and said, "Well, I had bad information the last time," which I think is really, really, really awesome. And then Troy Hunt, one of the top application security professionals in the field. He does a lot of different things, as you'll see, but he blogs. He does a video log, which is also an audio format for podcasting. His podcast does cover a lot of general stuff, but it has a lean towards application security. If you've used Have I Been Pwned, he is the creator, and he runs that as well. So he talks a lot about breaches and stuff. He just went to Congress to talk about breaches. So he's got a lot of interesting things to say. Training options. Again, Troy Hunt, he does training. He does workshops for developers. A lot of it's in Europe. Sometimes he comes up to the West Coast. Companies can hire him to come in. He's recently released a remote workshop option so people can do it remotely. If you're looking for something a little bit closer, Tim Tomes runs the Practical Web Application Penetration Testing course. And he does the same thing. He'll come out. He's in the Southeast a lot. He goes up to Boston. So if you're looking individually, you can go to that kind of stuff. Just go to his website. But companies can also hire him to come in and train developers on application security. I've taken this course, and what I really like about it is you spend 2 to 3 days breaking an application and then 1 to 2 days doing remediation on it, which I think is important. If you're into Pluralsight like I am, anything by Troy Hunt, he's got like 33 different modules up there now. anywhere from like an hour long to 9 hours long. So there's a lot of content to dig into. A couple recent ones I've gone to is Securing Your Node.js Web by Max McCarty. And then, as I mentioned, for the threat modeling fundamentals, Peter Mosmans has a really great course. It's an hour and a half long. It can probably be shorter if you just focus on the developer side. Is that? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So you said Mike Woolard has a Zap course on Pluralsight. Okay, cool. Um, I will say that I've done security training on this. I've also done just learning more about Jenkins, learning more about Docker. So there's more than just security stuff on here. There's a lot of great technology, a lot of great authors doing a lot of great stuff on there. So final thoughts. Again, you want to inventory, do some threat modeling. Vulnerabilities are ultimately just bugs. It sounds like I was on point with my rant about security people throwing stuff over the wall and not really kind of giving any kind of context, which I'm sorry for. I will apologize for security people everywhere. We're trying to get better. I am preaching this at conferences. I have told them not to do that. I can't get everybody. And then, static and dynamic testing. Implement what makes sense. If you're doing this, great. Hopefully I built up some confidence for you. Implement also what makes sense. So, if this makes sense here, hopefully this helped you a little bit. You can do it in pieces. It took me a long time to get a lot of this spun up. And I'm still constantly trying to get more and more stuff in there to improve it. And as you can tell from the feedback we've gotten from the audience, there are a lot of other technologies out there. So that's pretty much it. If you have any feedback, any suggestions for this talk, I'd like to give this at more developer conferences to hopefully guide them. If you didn't get something from this talk that you're expecting, let me know. Love to hear about it. I run the Exploring Information Security podcast. I have a different professional on each week to talk about a security topic. Sometimes it's application security, sometimes it's something else. I'm at Timothy DeBlock on Twitter. TimothyDeBlock.com is on my website, and Timothy.dblock@gmail.com. If you don't want to, talk to me afterwards, I'm actually going to book it because I have a 9-hour drive back to Tennessee, and I'm going through the snow. So